Despite being a huge fan of both American and Japanese shoot-'em-ups from the 1980s, I have extremely limited experience when it comes to the European shoot-'em-ups that populated computers like the Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC, and ZX Spectrum. Not that I was discriminating against them or anything, but I just didn't have a whole lot of exposure to those machines. That's why I was so excited to play X-Out Resurfaced, a brand new remake of a 1989 Amiga game by Rainbow Arts. While light on story and a little bit slower than the shooters that I'm used to, I was eager to play through a game that I missed out on as a kid. But, was it worth the 36-year wait? Well, that's what we're about to find out when I review X-Out Resurfaced by In Games. Right off the bat, you can tell that this isn't going to be your typical shoot-'em-up. Instead of flying a one-of-a-kind experimental craft like most shooters from that era, we actually end up having a choice of ships. We can either buy one of the 3 already assembled ships, or you can go in and equip the craft with different bullets and missiles and rotating satellites and more. This was a unique way to start the game, and it's going to be something that we're definitely going to come back to later. Now, once you're actually in the game, it won't take long for your shoot-'em-up instincts to take over. This is certainly a shooter that was inspired by what was popular at the time, especially R-Type and Gaiares. You control a large ship through alien-filled worlds that will take you underwater, into the crystal mines, and of course through a lava cavern. While the 8 stages aren't especially long, they are packed with a lot of enemies and environmental hazards. There's a nice mix of alien ships flying from all sides, along with stationary gunners shooting you from both the ground and the ceiling. One type of enemy the game likes to throw at you is a large ship that actually creates walls that you'll need to shoot at and destroy. This is especially effective because it limits where we can go, and it makes what is already a narrow cavern that much more claustrophobic. On top of the hordes of enemies, each level also has you battling 2 different bosses. This is another great example of how the European art design differs from what we were getting from Japan. While sure, some of the bosses are a little boring, there are a few that absolutely steal the show. The first one you encounter is a skeleton surrounding a giant glob of meat. It has a blood-soaked head that just flies around and tries to trap our hero. The whole thing is gross and horrifying in all the best ways. Unfortunately, the first thing I noted wasn't the grotesque monsters, but rather the game's unflinching difficulty. Even as a longtime veteran of the shoot-'em-up wars, I was surprised by how long it took me to get my groove with the speed and the gameplay of X-Out. A lot of this has to do with the large ship and the collision box, which is a lot bigger than you might expect. This is one of those games where it's extremely easy to blow up your ship by accidentally hitting a part of the level. And with only 1 life and no continues, you're going to be playing through the first couple of stages a whole bunch. But here's the weird thing. X-Out ends up shifting from being too tough to being entirely too easy so quickly that it's going to give you whiplash. The first couple of stages are difficult because you're too busy building up your ship's arsenal to buy new ships. However, it won't take long before you have enough credits to afford buying multiple ships, which end up acting like extra lives. These ships can be more powerful and better equipped, making each stage a lot easier to contend with. And because we're given so many credits at the end of each level, we're able to stock up on ships, allowing the player to take more chances without worrying about that dreaded game over screen. Now, being able to buy extra ships and customize them is really the one truly unique thing about this game. There are 4 different ships to choose from, each allowing you to add more weapons and auxiliary satellites. You can change both your primary and secondary attacks, as well as the types of missiles that you'll be firing automatically. There are also different special attacks you can buy, and even a couple of upgrades, which will make your craft virtually unstoppable. With 9 slots for the different ships, you're going to spend a lot of time fiddling around with your fleet. Of course, if you still find yourself failing, even with the addition of extra ships, then the game's going to help you out by popping up a screen asking if you want to unlock a cheat. I love how this is presented, kind of like it's a cheat crack that you might run with the game. You know, like you would have done back in the day when this was on computers. That said, I do kinda wish that all of the cheats would unlock the moment that you beat the game, because dying over and over and over to unlock the few cheats that apparently you didn't need just doesn't sound like a fun way to spend an afternoon. Still, this is a fun idea, even if the execution could use some tweaking. One fun extra that the remake comes with is a mirror mode, which flips everything around, adding a brand new challenge. With pretty much every horizontal shooter going from left to right, it's surprisingly disorienting to turn things around. This used to be a mainstay of classic racing games, and I'm actually surprised that we didn't see this type of thing in more shooters of that era. On the other hand, once you've beaten the game backwards, I'm just not sure how often you're going to want to revisit the mirror mode. And that's my complaint about X-Out in general. While the 8 levels are fun to fight through, it won't take you long to beat them, and there just isn't a whole lot of reason to come back. Games like Thunder Force 3 and Gaiares were replayable because they were fast and fun and exciting. Between the action-packed levels and the memorable bosses, it just felt like you were on a roller coaster ride. X-Out is more like standing on a moving sidewalk. It's considerably slower and nowhere near as exciting. I don't know, it may be fast compared to the other shooters on Amiga, but it just can't compete with what the Japanese were doing at the time. Look, if you grew up loving this game, then this is going to be $20 well spent. Everybody else may want to wait for a sale before diving into X-Out Resurfaced. While it may not rise to the same heights as R-Type and Gaiares, X-Out is still a fun shoot 'em up with something unique to offer. Being able to fully customize your ship adds a lot of depth to what could have been a straightforward action game. And I really like how you can build new ships that end up acting like extra lives. Unfortunately, it's the very thing that I like the most about this game that ends up making it far too easy. There's an extra mirror mode that'll give some players a reason to go back a second time, but outside of that, there's just not a whole lot to bring gamers back to this 36-year-old shooter. I'm happy that a whole new generation, including myself, will be able to experience this old-school classic in one form or another, but X-Out Resurface just can't compare to the genre greats. Hey, thanks for watching my review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite video game remake? I'm not talking about a remaster or an upscaled port, but rather it has to be a remake that has new graphics. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back on Friday with some magazine-on-magazine violence. That is, unless Nintendo announces more classic games for their Nintendo Switch Online service. I guess you'll have to tune in tomorrow to find out what happens. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,